It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to Rico Brogna, episode number 599. The winter meeting's well underway in Central Florida, and you know what's happened so far? Nothing! It is a sign that maybe this offseason is really going to crawl ever so slowly throughout the winter months, into the early spring months, and maybe we're going to be sitting here in the middle of February still wondering what our roster is going to look like. It is possible. That's baseball. You never know how slow an offseason can go. David Stearns did meet the media on Monday at the winter meetings, and what we like to do here on the Rico Brogna is twofold. Number one, if you didn't hear what David Stearns had to say, you'll hear every second of what he had to say here on the Rico. And after each answer, we stop it and we respond and give you our thoughts on what David Stearns had to say on the Monday portion of the winter meetings down in Florida. A couple of Mets and news and notes that we should touch on. Number one, Carl Edwards Jr. gets a minor league contract. Carl Edwards Jr. is one of those guys who a few years ago was one of the better relievers in all of Major League Baseball. I don't know what happened, but he's kind of fallen off the radar. He's bounced around a little bit, pitched a little bit in the American League last season. Not so much success, didn't do it very often. So Carl Edwards Jr. is one of those guys where you throw him in a spring training, you see what it looks like. There's a chance he could make the team. There's a chance that this is a footnote that we forget completely about. But certainly a guy with Major League experience, guy who's done it before. It's been probably a good 3 or 4 years since he's been a better reliever in baseball. But the Mets invite him to spring training, and we'll see what happens. Number two, Joel Sherman had a report on Monday about a lot of interest, not just from the Mets, but a lot of teams in both Freddie Peralta and Trevor McGill. I'm surprised that the Brewers would trade McGill unless they just figure they can get a great return and it's worth doing, because McGill, the brother of Tyler McGill, one of the better relievers in baseball, one of the better relievers on Milwaukee, was hurt a little bit last year, came back at the very end of the season. I remember because we were rooting so passionately for him and the Brewers when they were taking on the Cincinnati Reds at the close of the 2025 season. But he's one of those relievers who has 2 more years of team control and doesn't make a lot of money. So if the Brewers decide to trade Trevor McGill, it is merely taking advantage of maybe his best value. Thinking, what's his value a year from now? And certainly 2 years from now when he's a free agent, maybe you don't pay him, maybe he's not back. So I think the Brewers don't have to trade Trevor McGill, but they're certainly seeing an interest around Major League Baseball. And why wouldn't you? You know, if you don't want to give a top reliever a lot of money, like Pete Fairbanks or Robert Suarez or Edwin Diaz, you can acquire McGill. It's going to cost you prospects, and it's going to cost you a lot less financially. And it's possible he's connected with Freddie Peralta. My fear on Peralta is that the Brewers are going to try to ship him to the American League. That even if the Mets have a more appealing package than, say, the Yankees, so Joe Sherman also linked to Freddie Peralta and Trevor McGill, or specifically Trevor McGill. I'm not saying this just based on Corbin Burns, but if the Brewers are going to try to contend in the National League, and that's what they do, they move guys away who are about to make a lot of money, and they still try to compete. And they've done a really good job at doing that in the David Stearns era and even in this post-David Stearns era. I just wonder if they would take not a significantly less offer, but they would just prefer to send him to the American League. So I would love Freddie Peralta. When you look at the amount of money he makes, it's an absolute steal. Obviously, it runs into another problem, which is the fact that David Stearns is adverse, until proven otherwise, to giving long-term contracts to starting pitchers. And that was the other piece of news that came out, or piece of information, because it's not really news, it's more of a rumor, that came out from The Athletic in the last 24 hours, and that's that David Stearns doesn't want to give a long-term contract to a starting pitcher. Here's what's funny about this, because I am laughing. I don't blame him. You know, we did a deep dive on all the starting pitchers on the Rico probably a month ago now. And as we were going through each arm, whether it was Dylan Cease, who signed with Toronto, whether it was Framber Valdez, who the Mets have been linked to, no matter who it was, I came away also not wanting to give these players 6-year contracts. And I hearken back to last year when Max Fried was a free agent and Corbin Burns was a free agent. And I looked at both of those guys, but specifically Burns, and I certainly would have been wrong about that, as a guy I would have been more willing to give a long-term contract to than any of the guys who are free agents right now. So if David Stearns does give a long-term deal, and by long-term we're talking 5 years, 6 years, even 7 years, though I doubt any starting pitcher is getting 7 years that's remaining, but you never know, it would show a real contradiction. It would show that the results of 2025 led David Stearns to doing something that's out of his comfort zone. I think when a lot of people read that report or hear that report right now on the Rico, your reaction is to hate David Stearns and say, hey, grow a pair. If you're trying to be a team president in New York, you've got to take some risks. And I do agree with that. But it's selective on where you take those risks. I say this all the time because I don't mind being wrong. I'm always honest about what I've said in the past. I looked at Corbin Burns as a guy who I was willing to take that risk on. Some disagreed. You guys would have been right, at least in the short term, because obviously he needs Tommy John surgery. In the short term, Max Fried looks like someone who would have been willing to maybe go long term on. The current list of starting pitching free agents, there aren't many guys that jump out at me as someone that I would want to jump into bed with on a 6-year contract, which brings me to Michael King, a guy the Mets have been attached to, and a guy who has been prognosticated to get a 3 or 4 year deal. Well, we saw David Stearns give Sean Manaea a 3-year contract. So 3 years feels like a comfort zone. If you were willing to give Sean Manaea a 3-year contract at $75 million, I'd have no issue giving Michael King a 3-year contract. Michael King on a 3-year deal feels like the most appealing of the rumored contracts that may be out there. Framber Valdez, and I like Framber Valdez. He's been the definition of consistency over the last half decade, but giving him a 6-year contract, no. But what's funny about this discussion is if it comes out that the Mets are giving one of these starting pitchers a 6-year contract, while I may not like the move, and you may not like the move in terms of the risk over the 6 years, we would probably eventually say, great, you got to take a risk. The rotation's better. Let's go. And we'll worry about 5 years from now. But those are the bits of information that have come out over the last couple of days, but really no significant moves. And I think it was Buster Olney who put it out earlier on Monday that this just may be a slow-moving offseason. Well, what else is new? I mean, doesn't that feel like every MLB offseason? And what's challenging about a slow-moving MLB offseason is that we all sit here, whether you're fans or you're on the radio or you're calling up the radio or you're listening to this podcast, and you end up speculating for months, as opposed to in the NBA and the NFL and the NHL, free agency starts, boom, moves happen. So get comfortable. We'll try to come up with some creative Ricos over the next few months while we wait to find out where these guys are going to end up. I do want to fulfill a promise, and this will be at the end of the week. After the winter meetings are over, we will indeed grade David Stearns' trades as New York Met team president. That was requested by a loyal Rico listener, and we will deliver it in a little less than a week. But let's hear from David Stearns. He, of course, the team president of the New York Mets, who met the media in Central Florida on Monday. Great job by Pete Hoffman. Did some fine editing. So he edited this to 32 questions. You will hear the question, you will hear his answer, and then we will respond. So of the 32, let's kick it off with number 1 for the president, David Stearns.
What do you hope to accomplish this week?
I think in any transaction period, and certainly true at the winter meetings, you want to make your team better. And I think we're focused on doing that. We also know it's a really long offseason. We'll see whether we're able to get anything done here. At this point, it's too early for me to know that one way or the other, but I am confident that we're making progress to ultimately make some transactions that we think really help our team and our organization going forward.
Well, isn't it great to start with a softball? What do you hope to accomplish? Listen, idiots, I hope to get better. I mean, isn't that the goal? But then David did give us a warning that while he hopes to get better, it may not happen over these few days in Florida. It may take a lot more time. So get comfortable. Here's question number 2 for David Stearns.
At this point in the offseason, where do you feel like the team needs to get better?
I think we're open-minded to getting better anywhere. I don't think there's a segment of our team right now that we can look at or that we would look at and say that's a finished product. So we have to be open-minded to all of the above. We've been very open, and I've been very open from the moment our season ended that we have to get better at keeping runs off the board. And I think we've made some progress in doing that, and we're going to continue to look at areas where we can add players to our team that help us do that.
Everywhere is David Stearns' answer. We need to get better everywhere. Our starting pitching sucked. It needs to be better. The best closer in baseball is currently not on our roster. We need to keep him, and if we don't, we need to get better. The guy who had a lot of home runs last year and was probably our most clutch offensive player throughout the season, he's not on the roster right now. He's a free agent. And, oh, yeah, we traded our left fielder. So the succinct answer is we need to get better everywhere.
Do you plan to meet with Pete Alonso this week in person?
I did see Pete was coming. I think Pete knows us really well. I think we know Pete really well. I think he'll take the time here to perhaps meet with organizations he doesn't know quite as well, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
I don't dislike David Stearns. I don't. So what I'm going to do right now is explain why other people do dislike David Stearns, including my old partner, Joe Beningo. That laugh. Like, what is so funny? What is so funny? Are you going to meet with Pete Alonso? And instead of saying, and his answer was totally fine. His answer was, we don't need to meet with Pete Alonso. He knows us. We know him. Let him meet with these other teams. Go find a better offer. But that laugh, and I promise you, I have no issue with it. This is my trying to explain why others don't like him. They will interpret that laugh as arrogance, as he doesn't really want Pete Alonso, even though nothing about that answer would tell you that. I think the answer is the right answer. Why do I have to meet with Pete Alonso? We met with him last year. We know him very well. The Mets and Pete Alonso is all about money and years, and it's all about daring him to get an offer elsewhere. And for him, if he's thinking of going to Boston or he's thinking of going to Baltimore, maybe learning more about that organization. Let's hear more from David Stearns.
How would you characterize how things are going with Pete?
I'm not going to characterize it. I think I'll stick to my policy of not commenting on negotiations as they're ongoing.
But you definitely still see a place for him here.
As I've said all along, he's a great Met. We'd love to have him back.
We'd love to have him back at the right price. I'm not going to tell you what that right price is. I'm not going to tell you how many years it is. But sure, we'd like to have him back, which I genuinely believe. I know Pete and I fight about this. Even Joe, I've mentioned, doesn't believe this. This is about we will take him back at the right price. And we don't know what the right price is. And look, as honest as a guy like Brian Cashman is, he's never going to openly negotiate through the media. So I wouldn't expect David Stearns to say, yeah, we made him a 3-year, $95 million offer. We're just waiting to hear back. So it sounds very similar to the stuff that David Stearns would say last year about his negotiations and not characterizing it with Pete Alonso.
Does that mean, I mean, I know that's the line that you use when we talk about Pete, but to what extent is he a priority? Like, you don't have a clear and obvious starting first baseman right now. There are other guys you can go and get, but to what extent is Pete himself a priority for you?
Yeah, I think Pete has demonstrated that he's one of the best offensive players in baseball, and he's performed at a high level for us, and so that would be a priority for any team. It certainly is for us.
Good. That's a good answer. I mean, do you not believe that, Hoff? He's one of the better offensive players in baseball, and if they lose him, that's pretty tough.
I think that is the most genuine answer that we've ever heard from him talk about Pete Alonso. But the problem is, if that's the case, then why are you not bringing him back like right now? Why is this not a priority?
Are we really going to do this again?
Well, I'm just saying.
Because I'm going to say this as slowly as I can so you understand this and so everyone else understands this. Because Pete Alonso and his agent are apparently asking for a 7-year contract. No one is coming close to that. The Mets are, let's say, offering him a 3-year contract at $95 million until another team, and this has been over a year now we've done this, until another team gets into that area and starts to offer Pete more than what the Mets are offering. Why are they going to bend over backwards and negotiate against themselves? We got to stop with this.
I understand. It's a big circle here. It's a big circle, but
I know, because you don't because you keep saying the same thing, and I'm like, don't you understand? Why should they negotiate against themselves?
eventually, listen, at the end of the day, if he signs with somebody else, then we can have that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. He signed somewhere else. He gets that contract, and we could all bitch. Why didn't they give him to that? Why didn't they give him that? But I appreciate that you said that was the most genuine David Stearns has ever been.
It was realistic. It was truthful. I mean, honestly, that is the one thing we were waiting for. I hope they feel that way. But anyway.
Here's what's so tricky about this. He knows what we all know, which is forget Pete for a second. All right, we all love Pete, or most of us love Pete, want him back. If he leaves, they create a new hole to replace. You know, right now, they created a hole by trading Brandon Nimmo, but they fixed something in their minds by giving themselves sturdier defense at second base and another right-handed bat who, at least in the recent past, has played like an MVP caliber player. So while they created a hole, they fixed something. If they lose Pete Alonso, they are creating a major hole in the middle of the lineup, and there aren't a lot of guys in free agency who can replace that. And I think David Stearns knows that.
Correct.
What's your level of interest in Schwarber?
I'm not going to comment on a specific free agent or free agent negotiation.
You know, this annoys me. I got into it with Billy Epler years ago when he came on the show with me and Craig. You are allowed to say, yeah, I talked to the agent about Kyle Schwarber. Like Brian Cashman does that. And so David Stearns always says, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to mention it. I've heard they like Kyle Schwarber. The problem is I think we've all heard that Kyle Schwarber is going to sign before Pete Alonso. So if your preference is Pete Alonso and Kyle Schwarber's a backup plan, well, he really can't be if he's going to sign first, unless you want to sign your backup plan before the guy that you prefer. So I think that's a complicated wrinkle in this.
What do you feel of the status of your bullpen at this point in the offseason?
So we're certainly thrilled that we were able to add Devin Williams. I wouldn't say we're done with our bullpen at this point. We recognize that we have slots to fill. Some of those may come through free agency. Some of those may come through trade. Some of those may come from some internal candidates who we think are poised to take a next step, either in their development or the next step in perhaps a role they can occupy at the major league level. But we understand we've got some roles to fill in the pen, and I'm confident we're going to be able to do so.
Yeah, they definitely have either 2 or 3 major league, and by major league, I mean major leaguers, not Carl Edwards Jr. invited to spring training, but probably 2 or 3, maybe 4, but I'll keep it at 2 or 3 major leaguers they need to add to their bullpen. As of right now, when it comes to the mortal locks, you've got Devin Williams, you've got A.J. Minter, but keep in mind, A.J. Minter is no lock to be ready for opening day, and you've got Brooks Raley. So you probably want to go in with maybe 5 or 6 sure arms out of your bullpen, so there's certainly more work to do.
I know you said you're open to anything generally every offseason, but where do you stand with long-term deals this year, this winter, knowing that you entered one last year with Soto?
So I think that the Soto contract, a deal of that extent, is quite unique. And I wouldn't envision that type of deal emerging for quite some time for our organization. But we will not close the door on any type of transaction. And so we have been engaged on multi-year and long-term type contracts. Whether it works out or not, I don't know. But we're not shutting the door on anything.
I know he says he's not shutting the door on anything, but there is one guy in free agency who could at least come reasonably close to the amount of years that Juan Soto got, and that's Kyle Tucker. He's not getting 15 years, but Kyle Tucker is certainly in play to get 10 years. And I'm going to take David Stearns' answer as, while not closing the door on Kyle Tucker, that is very unlikely. I think the only way the Mets become in play for Kyle Tucker is if he ends up deciding, you know what, I'm better off signing a short-term deal for a crazy amount of money and then re-entering the marketplace. That's where I can see the Mets being involved. But the way he talked about a Soto-like contract not being something they would want to get involved in, while Tucker's not going to get Soto's deal, I think from a length perspective, he may not be that far off. So at least that's how I take that answer, that they're not going to be involved in a 10 or 11-year offer for Kyle Tucker. But if the market for Tucker just doesn't develop the way he and his agent expect, maybe there's a place for a huge money short-term deal.
Yeah, but the one thing that he took that almost too literal and spoke around the, what do you consider a long-term deal? Or would you sign a long-term deal? Like, yeah, 10, 11 years is a long-term deal, but there's also like a 6-year contract, which is also considered a long-term deal. He didn't kind of mention about that. Like, so unless you consider that like a middle-term deal, I don't know.
Yeah, it's semantics. That's why I say it's how I interpreted what he said. I mean, you can argue, hey, Evan, a 10-year deal is nowhere close to Juan. He signed a 15-year deal. That's a half a decade apart. So it's semantics. It's just how I envisioned how he answered that. And I guess we could all do the same thing. Like, I look at the free agent market. Who's getting a 6-year deal? Honestly, like Pete Alonso could ask for it all day. Kyle Schwarber could ask for it. They're not getting it. I mean, who's getting a 6-year or 7-year contract? I know Cody Bellinger is going to try to get it. Is he getting it? I mean, he probably, believe it or not, Cody Bellinger may be the guy, after Tucker, of course, who gets the longest term deal. So we'll see.
Framber Valdez.
Yeah, not from me and not from the Mets.
Is there more of a willingness with position players maybe versus starting pitchers there?
I think it's always individual player specific. With starting pitching, you do have greater injury risk, and that is just a truism about pitching. And so that is factored into how we look at contracts and how we look at structuring a pitching staff and a team in general. But we have, and over my time here, engaged in very long-term type concepts with starting pitchers and pitchers in general. And so we're not going to categorically say no to that.
The only, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only long-term contract for a pitcher that it feels like the Mets were involved in over the last few years is Yamamoto. That was the one. And that felt like a very unique circumstance because of his age. And certainly looking at what happened this past year, he would have been worth every single dime. But outside of that, I don't think they've been involved in too many negotiations with pitchers in which they were willing to go long-term. And by long-term, again, we play the semantics game, a 5, 6, 7-year deal. Yamamoto feels like a unique circumstance in that case.
How do you define long-term in your mind? Like, how many years is a long-term contract for a pitcher versus a position player?
I don't know. I think it depends on age. It depends on where they are in their careers. I think it's very individual player specific.
So he doesn't want to answer the question. That's what it comes down to. It is very different for each player. Like Freddie Peralta, we talked about him at the beginning of the Rico that the Brewers may well trade him. Freddie Peralta is 29 years old. He's going to turn 30 in the middle of June. If the Mets acquire him, and it costs a lot, what I think some of us want to know is, are you even in play to keep him? You know, I'm okay renting a pitcher. I mean, the Mets are trying to win a championship, and I'm okay, eyes wide open, that you're trading for somebody that may only be with your team for a year. But I do want to know, is there going to be a willingness to give Freddie Peralta, let's say, a 6 or 7-year contract? Because that's what he's going to want. And if he puts together a big year, that would be his 4th consecutive 30-start season, and he gets Cy Young votes, he's going to get that. As a 30-year-old, he's probably going to get that kind of deal. So I would want to know, and I think it matters because I think it adds to what you should be willing to give up. If looking at someone like Freddie Peralta, who is going to be 30 in the middle of the season. So when you sign him at the end of this upcoming season, you're talking about a guy who's going to be going into his age 31 season, at least for half the season. Are you comfortable going 6 or 7 years? It doesn't mean I wouldn't trade for him if I wasn't, but I would look maybe a little bit differently at how far I'd be willing to go in terms of the prospect capital I'd be willing to give up.
I just really quickly, it feels like to me, without him saying it, David Stearns has a number in his head of when a baseball player just hits the decline. Like it's around like 33, 34 years old. That's what it feels like.
I think it depends on the pitcher, though. I do, because think about it. He gave Sean Manaea a 3-year contract. How old was Sean Manaea when he gave that contract out? So I kind of agree with him. I don't think it's universal. Manaea right now is 33, is going to be 34. So think about it. He gave Manaea a 3-year contract going into his age 33 season, 33, 34, and 35. So based on that, if it was just firm, I'll pay a pitcher till they're 35, then based on that, you'd be willing to give Freddie Peralta a 5-year contract. So I don't think it's just a number. I think it depends on the kind of pitcher and, the belief in how deep they can go in their career. I remember with DeGrom, I used to argue, and this was years ago when he signed his first extension, that even though he was older, he didn't have a lot of mileage on him. So I looked at that and said, hey, that's a sign that maybe he can pitch into his late 30s. And we've seen certain guys do it. When you look at Verlander and Scherzer, I mean, they're Hall of Famers, but going deep into their 30s. So I think it's different for each pitcher.
Gotcha.
They describe the trade market for starting pitching right now.
I think the trade market in general, agnostic of position, is pretty active. And I think there's a lot of chatter, and has been throughout this offseason, among teams in the trade market. It seems like teams in general are maybe a little bit more open and willing to be creative, to talk about different types of structures, to talk about need for need type trades at the major league level that maybe we've seen over the past couple of years at least. And so I think the trade market throughout the industry has been pretty active.
We haven't seen a lot of it yet, but according to David Stearns, it's bubbling. There's a lot of bubbling going on, which means maybe we will see a ton of trades. We have seen a decent amount of trades, especially if you compare it to years past. But that answer sounds like a lot may be brewing.
Do you feel you're in a better position to make trades this winter than you were, say, your first 2 winters here?
To me, I don't know. I think we've had a very successful player development growth, and we've had a number of players internally throughout our minor league system get better, and I think that's been recognized throughout the industry. And so when that happens, you receive a lot of incoming calls about young players, about prospects. So perhaps there are a few more opportunities like that to make deals, but we were able to make trades my first couple off seasons here as well, and so I imagine we'll continue to explore those and probably push something over the finish line at some point during the off season as well.
Oh, look at that! That's him predicting a trade right there. I think the answer is yes. You are in better position to make a trade for a few reasons. A, the farm system is loaded, but B, there's more aggressiveness in doing it now. Excuse me. Like year one, I didn't want to make trades. I'll just tell you from my perspective as a Met fan, I was like, man, I don't want to give up any young players. I don't think we're necessarily close to winning. You are coming off a year that is a massive disappointment. You gave $765 million to Juan Soto. You got older by trading Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien. I'm trying to win. So I think when you combine, you better be trying to win based on the age of some of the guys on this team and the fact that you do have a loaded system. I would expect more trades, and I would expect that you're in a better position to make more trades.
Dave, why do you think it's been so active trade-wise as opposed to some other years? Is it because of cost? Because it can be a more efficient way to add talent and.
So I don't know yet. I think we'll have a better sense of that retrospectively when we look back at spring training and see what actually occurred during the offseason, or maybe even opening day and looked at the offseason. My sense is there is a very large swath of the industry that is very much trying to compete and believes it's in a competitive window, whether it's big market, small market, mid-market. And so that may provoke a little bit more discussion on these need-for-need type trades rather than sort of your typical buy-sell trades. And those are fun. Those need-for-need trades are kind of fun to execute. They're fun to work through. It's more of a puzzle. And so I do think we've had more dialogue on that type of trade this offseason than in the past. And it could just be we're at a point in the industry where we've got a lot of teams that are poised to go into next year competing.
I like need for need trades as well. Those are fun. they're fun. You know why they're fun? Because they're easier to judge than prospects, where we go on Baseball Reference and we see where they're ranked and we see where their minor league numbers are. When it's major leaguer for major leaguer, and certainly we experienced that a few weeks ago with Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien, I think those are more fun too, David.
I mean, we've already done one of those. So, and you just professing the fact that you like doing that. So is that a route that you tend to explore, or one of the bigger avenues you tend to explore going forward? Or?
I think it is something we are exploring. They are those types of deals are also the most challenging to put together. But yes, we are having those types of conversations. And my sense is not only the ones that we are involved in, but my sense is those types of conversations are ongoing throughout the industry.
Who knows? Maybe David Stearns heard the Rico episode 598 and is like, damn, need for need. Mark Vientos for Jason Dominguez really does make a lot of sense.
Have they not been pulled off to this point because teams need clarity on like free agency, or else you would have done a couple maybe?
So we did do one.
Right. You did use couple.
Yeah. You know, I think it's the answer is I don't know. Generally, in off seasons, there are a series of transactions that ultimately sort of break things loose. And this year, it may be a series of trades rather than necessarily a series of signings. I know we've had what I would characterize as productive dialogue with other teams throughout the off season. We've lined up on one trade, and so far we haven't lined up on others. But I think ultimately we will line up on more.
I know that we'll never know, besides leaks that you get, some of which may not be true, but I would love to know at the end of every season, at the end of every offseason, some of the talked about trades. Wouldn't it be fascinating? Like, yeah, just to hear, yeah, we talked about this, we talked about that, didn't happen. They offered this, I offered that. That would be awesome to know, because you hear David Stearns talking about all the different trade possibilities and so many discussions that haven't completely lined up. It would just be fun at some point to hear, what were they, out of curiosity?
At this point, how do you view your starting rotation? Is there a need in your starting rotation?
Look, I think we'd like to be able to add a starter. We are also really comfortable and like our young starters that are emerging. We saw that last year with Nolan McLean. But certainly we're going to be canvassing where we can to bring in a starting pitcher and help stabilize the staff.
Yeah, the question is who? Mark Feinsand had a report on Monday at the winter meetings, and I'll read it to you concerning starting pitching. He writes, Michael King appears to be the Mets' top rotation target, as a source confirmed. The right-hander recently held a Zoom meeting with the club. According to sources, Mets president of baseball operations David Stearns is hesitant to sign a starting pitcher to a long-term deal of 5 or more years, which could take New York out of the mix for other top starters such as Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez, and Tatsuya Imai. I mentioned this at the top of the Rico. That is a part of the appeal of Michael King, that he is not being linked to a 5 or 6 year deal. He's being linked to a 3-year deal. And you look at Michael King, he doesn't provide. This is the negative about King. I'd sign it, by the way. Like, I've certainly seen the upside of him over the last 3 years, where on a 3-year, $75 million deal, if that's what it turns out to be, a similar deal to what Sean Manaea signed, I think from a length standpoint, from what he can offer standpoint, I think it'd be a good move. But the stability that I always talk about, he doesn't have. He missed half of last season. The year before that, his first full year as a starting pitcher was amazing. I mean, he got Cy Young votes. It was great. But before that, he was a relief pitcher for the Yankees. So he doesn't have this long track record of starting. But on a 3-year deal with the upside that he has, I get the appeal. Anyhow, back to more from David Stearns.
David, given Semion's range at second base, would you be comfortable with somebody who is maybe an average, below average defender at first base?
I don't know that I necessarily look at Marcus's skill set at second at necessarily impacting the type of skill sets we're looking at the defenders around him.
Oh, So if you were hoping his answer was Marcus Semion's got so much range, who cares about Pete Alonso at first base? You didn't get that answer. I don't also think it matters that much because I think it is clear that if Pete Alonso returns, he's going to DH a lot. Now, what is a lot? Is that 50 games, 80 games, 100 games? I don't know. I'm not even sure if Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns know that. So that answer doesn't scare me, even though he said, yeah, Marcus Semion's going to have no impact on how good a defensive first baseman we need. I think it's clear that Alonso comes back. He's a more times than he's ever been designated hitter.
How do you view left field right now? Is Jeff McNeil sort of your default starting left fielder? Are you looking to add some flexibility to the outfield?
I think as of today, if we were starting today, Jeff would see a lot of time in left field, and we think he's very capable of doing that. We are also in the market for an outfielder, and we'll see if we can pull something off there. But we do have confidence that Jeff can play regularly in left field and do a very good job there.
Do not worry. He has to say that.
Yep. I think that's possible too.
Oh, I cut you off. Sorry, David. He has to say that. I mean, what is he going to say? No, Jeff sucks. No, we're looking to trade him. I still think it is likelier than not that he gets traded. But look, Jeff McNeil's versatility is a positive because he's been the everyday second baseman for a long time. He can play the outfield, and he doesn't do a terrible job in the outfield. So that's a default answer from David Stearns. Like, sure, as of right now, he's the left fielder. Yeah, sure. And who's the first baseman as of right now, considering they don't have one?
Mark Vientos.
Right. There has to be an answer, even if it's not the right answer.
The tail end of that was, can Carson Bench play left field as well? And that's where he said, yep, he could do that too.
Yeah, he can. And the question is that preferred? Because everything I've read about Carson Bench is that he can play center field, but he is probably more ideally a corner outfielder. So keep an eye on that. Where do the Mets prefer Carson Bench to be competing for an outfield spot? Is it left field? Is it center field? Obviously, a lot of that will be based on what outfielder they do add.
Just back to Pete for a second. Last year after he signed, he said something to the effect of, like, until the very end when you guys went down to Florida, he didn't feel there was a disconnect in terms of, like, feeling wanted. Has that at all colored the way you guys have gone about it this year in terms of maybe wanting him to feel a little more wanted?
I think we've been pretty clear throughout the process that we'd love to have Pete back. We certainly made that clear to his agent right at the start of free agency. We also respect, just as we respected last year, that this is a process, and Pete has earned the right to go through the free agent process to evaluate the market, and we'll see where that leaves us.
DeComo feels me, bro. He feels me. You heard him. Is like, are you? He said he didn't feel as wanted as he wanted to be last year. Are you going to make him feel wanted? He knows what's going on.
Last year, though, is very different than this year. Last year, the priority was not Pete Alonso. It was Juan Soto.
True.
And so the first part of the offseason was all about Soto. And then the Mets signed him for $765 million, and they didn't budge on Pete Alonso. So I could see why in late January, early February, right or wrong, Pete's like, what about me? In this offseason, what is their priority? I mean, their priority is Pete Alonso's right up there with Edwin Diaz. Their priority A and B. So I don't think they have to do that. I think this is purely about money and years and a negotiation. So I think it's less complicated than a year ago.
Question, in your honest opinion, who do you think they will sign first if they sign either Edwin Diaz or Pete Alonso?
I think the Edwin Diaz market the Edwin Diaz negotiations can end at any moment because Edwin is the top of the market, right? He's not comparing himself to anybody else. He's not a backup plan for anybody. If you have the money to invest in Edwin Diaz, you're going to sign him. So I admit I'm surprised it's not done yet, quite frankly. Whether it's him staying with the Mets or going to Toronto or wherever, like, why not a conclusion? If I had to guess, the Edwin Diaz saga will end before the Pete Alonso saga.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Do you prefer to have guys cycle through DH, or are you okay with having one guy who's just in the DH?
I think at a certain level, you're okay having one guy as your DH. There are different ways to construct a roster. I think there are very successful offenses with one player who mans that position, and there are very successful offenses that allow a manager to rotate spots through there. And so I don't think we're wedded to one particular approach.
Keep this in mind, and I was going to play some clips of Carlos Mendoza in a few days. Carlos also met the media. I didn't think there was anything. We don't have to sit there and do what we do with David Stearns with Mendy, but he did make one comment, and I want to bring it up in relation to this. They're not DHing Juan Soto. We have to get that out of our mind. I have to get it out of my mind. And Carlos was very honest when asked about it. He said, quote, he doesn't want to DH. That's where we are. Juan Soto has no interest in DHing. He's not going to DH. And Mendy even said the only time he's going to DH is if there's a minor injury and it's a way to get yourself in the lineup and, deal with the injury, or a select half an off day, but not on any kind of consistent basis. So now you look at this roster and you see Brandon Nimmo is gone and Juan Soto is not DHing. So who of the regulars is really going to get a lot of DH days? I've suggested Francisco Lindor. They haven't done that. And it's probably the same thing as Soto. Lindor doesn't want to DH. So the Mets are probably more positioned today than maybe in our minds they were a few months ago to have just one guy be the designated hitter. And the guy on the market who fits that is obviously Kyle Schwarber.
You've moved a little toward right-handed with getting right-handedness with getting Semien. Is that still something you're looking at, or to a lesser degree looking at that?
Maybe to a little lesser degree, but I do think it would still help if we were able to add a right-handed bat somewhere.
He wants a right-handed bat. Yeah, look at the outfield. And I think the reason why a right-handed bat is so important, unless you think it's Tyrone Taylor, is someone to platoon potentially or have the job prior to Carson Bench as a left-hand hitter. And you look at the rest of the team. Brett Beatty is penciled in to be the third baseman, left-hand hitter, though he hit lefties well in the second half of the year. Obviously, Juan Soto, left-hand hitter, not that scares you. But probably in the outfield, it makes a lot of sense for one of the outfielders that they add to be a right-hand hitter.
You mentioned being comfortable with the young starting pitchers. Just what makes you feel that way versus maybe being worried or cautious because they are young?
They are young. I think sometimes we often equate youth with unpredictability. I think young starting pitchers have a pretty good history in this league, especially of late, especially when they have certain stuff packages of coming up to the big leagues and having success. Doesn't mean we're going to count on a staff exclusively of young starters, but certainly over the course of the year, we are going to expect significant contributions from a group that we think is really talented and about to get to the major league level.
So one of the things that's very exciting about this upcoming season, barring half these guys get traded, Nolan McLean is in the rotation. Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong are on the come, and Christian Scott is coming off an injury. Those are all electric young arms. But the reason, David Stearns says I forget the exact wording he used at the beginning, that young pitchers can't necessarily be reliable. They just don't have a track record. That's all it is. I mean, even Nolan McLean, as great as he was last year, we're talking about 9 starts. So it's tough to count on that 1,000%. But the Mets have a lot of young arms who are going to be a big part of this upcoming season.
Do you feel like your quote-unquote number one starter, like the guy who would start game one of a theoretical playoff series for you, is that guy already in your organization?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think we'll know that until we get much farther along in the offseason and until we get to spring training. I also think that oftentimes on opening day, the person you thought was the number one starter in a playoff series, you actually get to the playoff series and it's someone else. And we lived that a couple of years ago. I think even really good teams that go on and win a World Series like the Dodgers can live that over the course of a season. So I'm less preoccupied by thinking about who is going to start game one of a playoff series than I am about making the transactions that put the best possible team on the field that we can do.
What he just described are teams that don't truly have an ace. Like, if you have an ace, there's no, things may change by October. Like, if you have one of those special pitchers, whether it's Tarek Skubal or back in the day, Doc Gooden or Jacob deGrom. So his description of, hey, you never know, one guy you don't think of, and then, that's a rotation that doesn't feature an ace. When you have an ace, you know you have an ace, and things don't change.
Well, and you also heard some of the smugness there with the little laugh and stuff like that. He compares it to the Dodgers. Yes, they didn't have Shohei Ohtani to start the season, but he was there in the playoffs. Of course, you knew that he was going to have it. Shohei was never going to pitch the first half of the season. So, like, you can't compare that. You can't compare, like, guys like, I think, was it Glasnow or somebody else started off on the IL as well. So you can't compare the two. I understand what he's talking about. Like, hey, Manaea started the season last year for the Mets on the IL. That was unexpected.
Yeah, but Sean Manaea is not even close to being an ace. He just happened to be our best option on paper to pitch opening day. The Dodgers are loaded with aces. I mean,
I know.
Who's their best starting pitcher? I mean, Blake Snell's won a freaking Cy Young. Hasn't he won 2 Cy Youngs now? I forgot.
Yeah, and all I got to say is at the trade deadline, they traded away starting pitching because they had the surplus of it. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the Dodgers are not exactly the team you ever really want to compare yourself to. And by the way, Blake Snell has won 2 Cy Youngs. I forgot. He won in 2023 with San Diego, and then his first one was in 2018 with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's had a hell of a career, man, looking at Blake's numbers.
Hall of Famer.
And he only made 11 starts this past year, but 222 career starts now, a 3.15 ERA, 2 Cy Youngs. Not a bad little resume for Blake Snell, but anyhow, he's not a Met, so who cares?
Hall of Famer?
No, not quite yet.
Okay.
That's what I'm asking is, like, do you need more ceiling in your rotation? Are you comfortable with the amount of ceiling that you have currently?
You always want more ceiling. Do I think we need more ceiling? I don't think I'll go that far, but you always want more ceiling.
They don't need ceiling. They need reliability. Like, they have ceiling. I think we're talking about the ceiling to be a great pitcher. Nolan McLean has that ceiling. And I'd say all the young guys maybe have that ceiling. They needed reliability. That's what they missed because they didn't have a lot of that, which led to, 3-inning starts down the stretch of the season.
Did you ever hear the term quality over quantity?
I think I've heard it, yes.
Okay. That's what the Mets should try to go for in their rotation. Quality over quantity. Last year, there's a lot of quantity. Need more quality.
Yes.
What updates have you gotten from Kodai Senga, and is there reasonable expectations that he'll be able to contribute next year?
Yeah, Kodai has had an outstanding offseason, and I think maybe that's the most encouraging development we've had in terms of our offseason player progression. He feels great. He feels as good physically as he has since that 2023 season. He's going through his normal off-season routine. He's actually going to come over to the States at the end of the month and throw here as well, which I think is a great sign. So we're very encouraged about how Kodai is progressing through the offseason.
I don't know what to make of that because that could be the GM talk of we don't have to trade the guy, just letting everybody know. I know you're talking about him and we're shopping him, but we don't have to trade him versus Kodai Senga. It did leak out a couple of weeks ago, does not want to be traded and wants to be a New York Met. And so it could also be, Kodai Senga is flying to the United States. He's really showing the Mets he wants to be here. What I need to know about the Senga trade talks, what are we talking about here in terms of what they could get back? Because that's the real decider for me. I'd prefer not to trade him. You talk about guys with ceiling. Kodai Senga has ceiling. He's pitched like an ace-like pitcher when he's healthy. He just doesn't have reliability. So I don't know what to make out of that answer. Was that David Stearns just talking up a guy he's going to trade? Or is that, Kodai's doing everything. We may well keep him.
When you look at that outfield spot, is that an area where you can kind of address the run prevention, or do you need to fill some offense that you lost with Brandon? Or a little bit of both?
I think it's always a balance. It's always a balance. I do think we are, we believe defense is really important. And so in any acquisition we make, we're going to be cognizant of what that player does when he's standing at the position, not just what he does when he's in the box.
So that eliminates the Jason Dominguez, Mark Vientos trade because he's not good defensively. I think you need to have a balance. Obviously, I would love for the Mets to have Gold Glove defensive players at every single position. It is okay to have a position here and there in which your defense is subpar as long as you're getting enough back offensively. That is the key. The Mets did not score enough runs last year. They lost and didn't make the playoffs for a myriad of reasons. It was not just one thing. The Mets did not score enough runs. So I get it. I don't want their defense to be crappy, but you got to score runs.
Nick, you saw Murakami in Japan. What do you think about him?
Yeah, without getting into any specifics about our interest or non-interest, he's a really good player. I think he's going to be exciting for American fans to watch. There's a lot of power, and it'll be exciting to see how his Major League career unfolds.
Couldn't hear which Japanese player he was talking about, whether it was Murakami or it was someone else. I'm curious about Tatsuya Imai, who's only 27. We talked earlier about starting pitchers and David Stearns' nervousness of going on long-term deals with starters. One of the appealing things about guys coming over from Japan is that they can be younger, and Imai is going to be 28 years old in the middle of May. That is unique for a starting pitcher. So would you be more willing to go 5 or 6 years with someone who's 28 years old? I would. Obviously, I don't know if his ceiling is quite as high as Yamamoto. He's certainly not going to get paid like Yamamoto. He's talked a great game by saying he wants to beat the LA Dodgers. But I'm intrigued by him and Akamoto. Akamoto and Imai are the two Japanese players, at least I am relatively intrigued by.
By the way, just double checked. It was Murakami he was talking about.
He was talking about Murakami?
Yeah.
The Mets are not going to sign Murakami. He is a terrible defensive player. Not going to happen. So nice comment by David, but I'll save everybody the trouble. They're not signing him.
When it comes to Senga, there's been some times in the last few years that maybe you guys have not been on the same page in terms of like his rehab, or, there's been times where he just kind of seems to do his own thing or need to do his very precise routine. Is there a way that you guys can maybe get closer to the middle, back on the same page with each other?
So I don't know that we've not been on the same page. In fact, I think Kodai has done a tremendous job, and through Hero have done a tremendous job communicating with our medical staff and ensuring that our medical staff understands what his routine was in Japan, how he goes about things, what he feels most comfortable. And we've done our best to educate him on the practices that we're more accustomed to using here. And I do think there's been a meeting at the middle, and I think Kodai has been very motivated to do that. And I think we're in a really good spot there right now.
So you are happy with the communication with Senga right now?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Then why don't you like him? That would be my follow-up. Why does it feel like you dislike him? Why were you so disinterested when the rotation was in shambles of allowing him to come back after he went down to the minor leagues? There seems to be more to this story between the Mets and Kodai Senga.
Any updates on Minter or Christian Scott and how their rehab is going?
Yeah, both progressing very well. Scotty's going to come to spring training as a full participant, ready to go. AJ is looking more along sort of that original time frame, where I don't know if he's going to be good to go on opening day, but it could be shortly thereafter.
That means he's not going to be ready for opening day. And that's okay. I don't want to freak out about that. But that certainly sounds, when you're not committing to a return or being ready on opening day, that he won't be. The Mets should play it slow. There's no reason to rush it. It is a long-ass season, so that makes sense. And with Christian Scott, barring a lot of injuries, and you never know because injuries can certainly happen in spring training, especially to starting pitchers, I would expect that Christian Scott's going to pitch the first half of this year in AAA. Go to the minors and dominate. And then hopefully he forces his way here, as opposed to the Mets are desperate and they have to call him up. But I would expect Christian Scott's going to spend the bulk of the season in AAA and then maybe make an impact in the second half of the season.
Dave, because of who your owner is, we always think you're going to solve things big game hunting to some degree. Could you, and obviously you did a major trade here and a major free agent, but is it possible that you could be subtle the rest of the way?
I like that description.
I'm thinking about becoming a writer.
Yeah. Look, I think as always, it's probably a combination. Like I think we're probably going to make some moves that don't grab a ton of headlines that we think are really impactful moves for our organization. I'd imagine over the course of the offseason, there are also going to be moves that allow you guys to write a lot. And so I think it's probably a combination of the both, and that's what we should be doing. Like I think given our market, given the support that our owner puts into this team, we have the ability to make both the more headlining moves and the more subtle moves that quietly really help a roster.
So like one headlining move or like 4 headlining moves?
We'll find out. If I knew that, if I knew that right now, it'd be a lot easier off season.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't know. At the end of these David Stearns press conferences, I start to just shrug my shoulders and say, he's not telling us anything. I mean, and even that last part, if I knew how many headlining moves we'd make, life would be a lot easier. We don't know. Well, we have one more question left for David Stearns. Let's see how it ends.
2 more.
David.
2 more.
Oh, 2 more? All right.
2 more, yes.
2 more cracks at David Stearns to actually answer a question. We'll see if he does it.
By the way, don't you prefer David Stearns puns and like jokes rather than Scott Boras?
I mean, does David Stearns have jokes? What joke did he make?
I don't know, but he made everyone laugh. I mean, I guess he was funny.
No, there was nothing funny.
People.
That's called the media just kissing his ass for a few seconds. Like there was not. He didn't say anything funny. He's like, if I knew, I would tell you.
Oh, the fake laughter. Gotcha.
Yeah, gotta love that fake laughter. All right, here's one of 2 questions left for David Stearns.
Generally speaking, how important do you think a clubhouse is, and with the team underachieving last year, or anything you may have observed? Do you feel like that was something you'd like to improve on from last year's team?
I think we had a pretty good clubhouse last year, and I know a lot of you were in our clubhouse regularly, and I mean, maybe some of you would disagree with me. I don't know that many of you would walk in there on a daily basis and feel like this was not a good clubhouse. We have good people who play really hard, who want to win. We didn't play well for the last 2 months of the year. And when you don't play well for the last 2 months of the year, people get frustrated, as we should. People hold each other accountable, as we should. That doesn't mean it wasn't a good group. Doesn't mean it was a group that didn't care about each other. I think we did. We just didn't play well for the last 2 months of the year. And everyone was very frustrated by it.
The follow-up I'd have to that, and I agree with him. For anyone who listens to Rico knows, I think so much has been overblown by the locker room stuff. The follow-up would be, so you're telling me, David, trading Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien was all about baseball, and it wasn't about changing the dynamic of that room. Not that it's Brandon Nimmo's fault. No one's saying it is. So you're telling me it's all baseball, had nothing to do with, hey, I want to change the core. Be curious how he would answer that. All right, final question for David Stearns.
Your reaction to the reports of that, in particular, there was a disconnect between Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor.
Look, I think Juan and Francisco are 2 elite baseball players who care a ton about winning, who show up and work incredibly hard and play very well together. And from my perspective, that's what's most important. And they go out and produce, and I think they're going to help us win a lot of games.
Not really an answer, but he also probably doesn't know. He's the team president. He's not in the locker room every single day to know the relationship between Soto and Lindor. But I tell you, man, I get so frustrated by this crap because I felt it in 23. It happened the opposite in 24, and now again in 25, where it's just lazy. Let's talk about the locker room. Oh, the vibes are amazing. That's why things went well. Oh, everybody hates each other. It's so annoying, and it happens every single year. Every year we win, things are great. We lose, everything sucks. I'm sick of it. I find it to be one of the most overrated things in all of sports. One of our traditions when David Stearns speaks is our good friend Dan, friend of the show, puts together the David Stearns translator, where he interprets some of the comments that David made. So you remember earlier in the pod when David Stearns was asked about if he planned to meet with Pete Alonso, and he said, I didn't see Pete was coming. I think Pete knows us really well. I think we know Pete really well. Blah, 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 blah. I'm sure we'll be in touch. Here is the David Stearns translator from Dan. This is pretty sad that he has to come all the way to the winter meetings to beg teams because he has no market for the second straight year. And why the hell would I meet with him? So for the 400th time, I can tell him if he wants to come back here, he's getting the shortest contract ever. In that contract, he's no longer allowed to own a first baseman's glove or he'll forfeit his entire salary. Yeah, I'm good. I'll just wait for him to come crawling back on his hands and knees like last year. Remember when David Stearns was asked how much of a priority Pete Alonso is for the Mets this offseason? And David said, I think Pete has demonstrated he's one of the best offensive players in baseball. Well, here is what Dan says is the real meaning from David Stearns. I actually sent Pete a custom Scrabble board that had all the letters removed from it besides the D's and the H's. I wonder if he'll get the hint. Dan, you crack me up. That's why I read these, because it makes me laugh. David Stearns asked about reports of a disconnect between Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. You actually just heard that 30 seconds ago. According to the Stearns translator, these guys absolutely hate each other. And if we have another season like last one, these a-holes are really going to have to make me choose between the two, aren't they? Newsflash, Francisco, 15 years and $800 million already made the decision for me. So maybe it's time to put down the GQ magazine and worry about making the playoffs. David Stearns was asked if the Mets would be comfortable with a below-average defender at first base with Marcus Semion's range at second. The translator says, it's actually amazing how you guys just aren't grasping the concept that Pete Alonso will not be my first baseman under any circumstances. You really thought you were going to trick me in my Harvard education by saying Semien could make up for his defense? Nice try, but all you guys know I'm the smartest man in the room. You're going to have to do better than that. And finally, when David Stearns says that Kodai Senga is having an outstanding offseason, what he really meant was, I'm starting to get real worried I might not actually be able to trade this dude. Does anyone know where I can get the Men in Black mind eraser so I can use it on every GM here so they think 2023 was the only season Kodai ever pitched? Good job. Dan adding the comic relief after a long listening session from David Stearns. We got more from the winter meetings over the next couple of days. Of course, keep your emails flowing. We'll read a few of them over the next couple of days. The RicoB@gmail.com. The RicoB@gmail.com. We appreciate you listening, downloading, and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.